Okay, so we're going to look at the individual poems for week 5. All right. So we're going to start off with the Chimney Sweeper. Now, there are two different versions of this poem. One is in Songs of Innocence by William Blake, and the other is in Songs of Experience. And in your Blackboard shell, I included this link, which is an article from Slate, which kind of talks about these two different poems and the art of keeping us uncomfortable. And they talk about the fact that in many of Blake's writing, he tries to create this dichotomy between innocence and experience and what those two mean. And the article focuses on the Chimney Sweeper that offers elegant examples of Blake's unsettling art. And he goes on to write, I can think to myself that the poem in Songs of Innocence is more powerful than the one in Songs of Experience, because the innocent characters, both the I who speaks and little Tom Decree, provided their heartbreaking extremes of acceptance, the more devastating indictment of social and economic arrangements that sell and buy children, sending them to do crippling, fatal labor. In that light, the Experience poem, titled Chimney Sweeper, explicit and accusatory, can seem the lesser work of art. The Innocent poem is implicit and ironic. Its delusion or deceptive angel with a bright key exposes religion as exploiting credulous children rather than protecting them or rescuing them. The profoundly, utterly innocent speaker provides a subversive drama. But that judgment is unsettled by second thoughts. Does the irony of the Innocence poem affect me the more? Does it penetrate without seeming heavy? Precisely because I am aware of the Experience poem? Do the explicit lines, "They clothed me in the clothes of death and taught me to sing the notes of woe," reinforce the Innocence poem's meaning? Why pointedly differing from, maybe even criticizing that counterpart poem's ironic method? And does that too bring another significant note of dramatic outrage? Or to put the questions in terms of subject matter, both poems dramatize the way religion, government, and custom collaborate in social arrangements that impose cruel treatment on some people while enhancing the lives of others. Does the naked declarative quality of the Experience poem sharpen my understanding of the Innocence poem? Does the pairing hold back or forbid my understanding tendency to become self-congratulatory, I'm not going to get that word out, or pleasantly resolved? Is it in the nature of William Blake's genius to make such questions not just literary, but moral? So let's look at these two poems. So here's the Chimney Sweeper from Songs of Innocence. When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, "Weep, weep, weep, weep." So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. There's little Tom Decree, who cried when his head that curled like a lamb's back was shaved. So I said, "Hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head's bare, you know that the soot cannot spoil your white hair." And so he was quiet, and that very night, as Tom was a-sleeping, he had such a sight that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned, and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black. Then by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. Then down the green plain, leaping, laughing they run, and wash in a river and shine in the sun. Then naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom that if he'd be a good boy, he'd have God for his father and never want joy. And so Tom woke, and we rose in the dark and got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. So you go from that one to now listen to the song of experience. Now think about how positive that was, but with an underlying tone of accusation. If the chimney sweepers are good, if they behave, if they do their job well, then when they die, they get to go to heaven. So there's this sense of suffering in silence. Now let's look at this second poem. A little black thing among the snow, crying weep, weep in notes of woe. Where are thy father and mother, say? They are both gone up to the church to pray. Because I was happy upon the hearth and smiled among the winter snow, they clothed me in the clothes of death and taught me to sing the notes of woe. And because I was happy and dance and sing, they think they have done me no injury. And they are gone to praise God and his priest and king, who make up heaven of our misery. So these are very interesting looks at these poems. So in the first poem, we have our persona, the speaker, saying that his mother died and then his father sold him into the job of chimney sweeper. Now this is in the mid 1800s, and most people heated their homes with chimneys and fireplaces, and you had to keep those clean. So often children were employed because they were small and could fit in the chimneys, and they would literally put them in the chimneys, and they would take a long brush and clean out the soot. These children would breathe in the soot. There wasn't much protection for them. They would often fall off roofs or fall down chimneys because, again, there wasn't much protection. So this was a tough job in which most kids didn't live long. And if you wanted to be successful, you had to be small. So many kids would be starved by the people that ran the chimney sweeper company and basically owned the children, because they would be sold to these companies who then would house and feed the children while they worked for them. And of course they would keep the children's salary. So he talks about that. And then he talks about another little boy who had this nice curly white hair. And of course, hair would be very problematic for a couple of reasons. One, these kids weren't kept in good circumstances, so head lice was always a big problem. And curly white hair would just look always dirty and nasty in the soot. So cleanliness would be a bigger problem. So, of course, they would shave the children. And then this child has a dream of all of these sweepers locked in coffins. And then an angel opens the coffins and sets them free, with the assumption that they're free in heaven. So the boy gets this idea that the angels are saying to him, if you do good, if you work hard, if you obey your master, your reward will be heaven in an afterlife. So you may have a horrible existence now, but as long as you don't cause trouble, you'll get a reward later in an afterlife. So that's kind of a thing of innocence. a naive interpretation, a naive belief of what the angel's saying. So then Blake goes on to his song of experience. Now, this persona isn't naive, he's experienced. A little black thing among the snow, crying weep, weep in notes of woe. Where are thy father and mother, say? They have both gone up to church and pray. Because I was happy upon the hearth, and smiled among the winter's snow. They clothed me in the cloth of death, and taught me to sing the notes of woe. And because I am happy and dance and sing, they think they have done me no injury. They are gone to praise God and his priest and king, who make up heaven of our misery. So here the experience is that I am miserable, but everybody thinks I'm okay and think that they'll get their reward. So a very different tone, very dark colors, very kind of dark imagery. Think about the way these two poems are fit together. All right, so Blake doesn't have just that one. Let's look at another set of his songs from Innocence and Experience. He has another pairing that's interesting. The first one is The Lamb, and it starts off with, Little lamb, who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? Give thee life and bid thee feed by the stream and o'er the mead. Give thee clothing of delight, softest clothing woolly bright. Give thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Little lamb, who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Little lamb, I'll tell thee. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild. He became a little child. I a child and thou a lamb. We are called by his name. Little lamb, God bless thee. Little lamb, God bless thee. So if we look at this poem, first of all, we see that the rhythm is very childlike. So we're given, again, this sense of innocence. And then we have this little persona, which seems to be almost childlike in their word choices, in their tone, in the repetition, talking to a little lamb. And he's asking the lamb, do you know who made you? And the little lamb, he doesn't really, of course, respond. But the poet keeps asking, little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? So he's asking the lamb who created him. And he's saying, I'll tell you in the second stanza. He is called by thy name. So the Lamb of God is a name of Christ. So here we have a very Christian aspect to this poem. And he says he became a little child. And he's saying they're both children, and they're both children of God. So it ends in a kind of happy idea and an understanding of what their role is and the sense of placement in Christianity. So let's look at its second poem. This is the sister poem in the book of Songs from Experience. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? In what wings dare he aspire? What the hand there sees the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who make the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? So again, we have a poem in which someone is talking to a creature. In this case, the creature is the tiger. but we have a different tone here. The language is much more complicated, much more adult. There is this exotic feeling. Tigers were exotic creatures. They had just recently seen them in England for the first time. But we also have this kind of imagery, not of Christianity, but of paganism. That there's this sense that, when I read this poem, I always think of Tolkien with the creatures being forged in the fires. But this idea that someone's forging them in fire partly has an imagery to the devil, all right, in the fires of hell. But more importantly, it has a pagan image of the Greeks forging creatures in the volcano. So, I think that's really where this comes from. But the dread, the fires, all of that has very kind of paganistic elements to it. Elements that seem to share a more demonic tale. So we have this darker vision. All right, next one from Songs of Innocence, The Shepherd. How sweet is the shepherd's sweet lot. From the morn to evening he strays. He shall follow his sheep all the day, and his tongue shall be filled with praise. For he hears the lamb's innocent call, and he hears the ewes' tender reply. He is watchful while they are in peace, for he knows when their shepherd is nigh. For they know when their shepherd is nigh. Back up. So again, very innocent, very kind of childlike. Lots of Christianity images here again. Now, Blake himself wasn't a Christian. In fact, he was one of the first atheists. But this definitely has a lot of Christian origin. All right, for The Garden of Love by Blake. Again, look at the Christian images here. I went to the Garden of Love and saw what I had never seen. A chapel was built in the midst where I used to play on the green. And the gates of the chapel were shut, and thou shalt not writ over the door. So I turned to the garden of love that so many sweet flowers bore. And I saw it was filled with graves, and tombstone where flowers should be. And priests in black gowns were walking their rounds, and binding with briars my joys and desires. So here, the Garden of Love, this image writ over the door of saying thou shalt not gives you this image that, the image of the Garden of Eden once Adam and Eve were thrown out. And then you see, when he looks around, he sees that the flowers are actually gravestones. So you have this garden of stone image here, which is a really interesting look at the idea of the Garden of Love. See how it changes from flower and life and joy to death and negative issues. The priests in black gowns, the binding with briars. So these idea of thorny branches binding his desires in his heart. So the death of youth replaced with the future of death. London. This is another interesting one. Look at how way everything is set together, and these should be all together. They shouldn't have a line in between. Sorry about that. I wander through each chartered street where the chartered times does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. That's the first stanza. This is the second stanza. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. I wander through each chartered street where the chartered times does... Oh, this is the way it should be, sorry. Let me reread that again. I wander through each chartered streets where the chartered times does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackened church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But many through midnight streets I hear, how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear, and blights with plague the marriage hearse. All right, let me go back. So think about these images here. He's walking through London. He said he wandered the chartered streets, the mapped out streets. And in every face he sees marks on their face of weakness and of sadness. And then he's saying in every cry, in every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, the mind-forged manacles. What are mind-forged manacles? Manacles are handcuffs, and they're created in the minds of the people hearing these cries. How the chimney sweepers cry, every black church appalls. So when he hears the chimney sweepers crying, because maybe they've fallen to their death, so the blackened church appalls, meaning the bells of death ring. Remember those, when I hear the bells, that's usually a sign someone dies. And then the hapless soldier's sigh is seen in their blood running down the palace walls. In other words, dying for their king. And in most streets I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tears. So here we have the harlot cursing over the baby's cries, which has some sort of negative effect, like blighting with a plague the marriage. And it's not a marriage carriage, it's a marriage hearse. So why would these three go into effect? Well, the prostitute that the gentleman may have had sex with results in an infant, but that infant has an effect on that man or woman's future marriage, and kind of turning the marriage from a happy thing into a negative thing. All right, we're out of Blake. Let's look at My Last Duchess. And listen to this one carefully. That's My Last Duchess painted on the wall. And this is a dialogue, but only one side of the dialogue. So we hear the Duke talking to an unknown person. So the Duke is saying, that's My Last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder. Now Frau Pandolf's hand worked busily a day, and there she stands. Wilt please thou sit and look at her, I said. Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I. And seems as though they would ask me if they durst, how such a glance came there. So not the first are you to turn and ask thus, sir. 'Twas not her husband's presence only, called that spot of joy in the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much. Or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. So, in a second, Dad. Sorry about that. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere, sir. 'Twas all one. My favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bowels of cherries of some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all in each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush, at least. She thanked men. Good, but thanked somehow. I know not how. as if she ranked my gift of 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such a one, and say just this or that, and you disgust me. Here you miss, or here you exceed the mark. No, Dad, in a second.
All right.
Sorry about that. Just in this you disgust me. Here you miss, or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessened, so, nor plainly set her wits to yours forsooth, and made excuse even when one would some stooping, and yet I chose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without such the same smile? This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands, as if alive. Wilt you please, wise? We'll meet the company below. Then I repeat the count, your master's known munificence in as ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self, as I vowed at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go down together, sir. Notice Neptune, though, naming a seahorse, thought a rarity which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. Here we have this duke saying to the representative of another count, whose daughter he is arranging marriage with, that this picture of his last duchess is there, and he treasures it, the picture. But she, the last duchess, looked upon everybody the same and didn't appreciate the depth of his name and rank, and may have allowed too many men to compliment her. And there's even the hint that she may have, gone along with them and maybe had affairs. But whether or not that was true, the fact that she smiled at other people the same way she smiled at him made him angry. So he gave commands, and she was killed. And now the only thing that exists of her is the picture. And then he goes on to talk about another sculpture that he has. So think about the tone of this poem. All right, I'm going to take a break, and you're going to see a part 2 of this video in which I will go over the other poems.